This is Fearless Careerist with Dr. Catherine Robert. On this episode, Catherine speaks with Paul Osterhout, former Disney Imagineer and now public speaker and coach for Making the Perfect Pitch, about his path from firefighter to leading development of memorable entertainment experiences around the globe.
That's really the one big lesson that I've learned is I never thought I would be a vice president at Disney or Universal. I thought I was going to be a firefighter and a paramedic, but I'm happy. I'm very happy to how it ended up because along the journey along the way was what made it fun.
Here's Catherine Robert.
Today's guest is a former Disney Imagineer who worked on, then led teams for some of the coolest Disney experiences, including Epcot, the update to Tomorrowland, Muppet Vision 3D, and Aerosmith's Rock and Roller Coaster, for example. Paul Osterhout has worked his way up from working as a model and set builder to vice president at Disney. Following Disney, he led the launch of video games at Electronic Arts and led planning for new theme parks around the world with Contour Entertainment, Universal Parks, and Century Media. It's safe to say that he has built magical experiences in all mediums. When moving back to the United States, Paul decided to share the skills that he practiced most in his career, selling ideas to people. Paul realized that everyone needs to pitch not only ideas, but also themselves. He now mentors and trains people in practicing the perfect pitch, and he joins us here today. Welcome, Paul.
Well, hi, Catherine. What a great introduction. I should just record that and just use that. Thank you. Thank you for that. You've encapsulated my whole career in 30 seconds.
Awesome. That's good. Well, then I must have learned something from your mentoring, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Is it still exciting to say that you create magic for a living?
It is exciting to say that, but look, can I tell you a real quick story? I spoke in Europe about maybe 10 years ago at another conference, and I was coming back, and my plane changed over in Manchester, UK, and it was an overnight flight. So it was like 10 p.m., and we're in the lobby waiting area to get on the plane. So there was a bunch of children running around, and they were very excited, obviously, and they were talking about, oh, we're going to go see Mickey Mouse, or we're going to go see Harry Potter. And I realized at that moment that these young parents were taking their children to Central Florida, to Disney, and it was probably a reoccurrence that their parents took them 20 years prior. It was this realization that what we create is magic, but more than that, I think we create memories. And so ultimately, that's what we do as theme park designers or museum or experience designers is we create memories. And we may do it by building sets or building special effects or animated figures and all that. But the reality is what we do is we make memories. So that's kind of the way I like to think about it.
What fun. What fun. Well, let's start. Yeah. Let's start with your early career plans coming out of high school.
Yeah. So I lived, yeah. So like most high school kids, there weren't many plans. But no, I lived in a small town here in Orlando, or a little bit north of Orlando. It was a suburb, actually. It was an unincorporated area, and there really wasn't anything for teenagers to do. So some of my friends had joined the volunteer fire department, and it was like, oh, okay. That sounds like fun, So we joined the volunteer fire department. At some point, I think it was in 10th or 11th grade. The area where I lived incorporated and became a city. So then they got tax money from the state to start a police department and fire department. And they offered us high school kids to go to fire college and become certified and licensed. We would go to high school during the day, and in the evening we went to essentially fire college and became firefighters. And I thought that was going to be my career path. So I was going to be a firefighter, and I went to take classes of being an EMT, and ultimately I thought I would become a paramedic perhaps. But like the plans of any young person, they can change. And my plans changed based on a hobby that I had. One of the hobbies I had was magic, like a lot of young children get interested in magic, and most of them grow out of it. But I didn't. So,
I can still rub a quarter into my elbow. So I'm a big fan,
There you go. There you go. See? So I performed a little bit, but for me, the magic for me wasn't about performing. It was about the psychology of magic, and it was about the mechanics of it, the engineering part of it. I was hanging around this magic shop as part of a place close to where I worked. They were part of it, like a roadside attraction and adding new exhibits. And they were looking for people that could sculpt. And I said, well, I can sculpt. I mean, I made some of my own magic stuff, so I guess I considered myself a sculptor. And they hired me. And so we would work from like 11 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning, adding these new exhibits. They liked what I did. So they said, this job is done, but we have another one coming up in Daytona Beach. If you're interested, we'll pay your salary. We'll pay you to live on the beach and pay your meals. And I was like 18 years old. And I'm going like,
great.
What's the downside here? So the firefighting stuff got put on hold, and I went and did that job in Daytona Beach. And that job turned out well. This company was based in Southern California. And they said, well, if you're interested, there's a job for you in Southern California if you want to come. And again, I was 18, maybe 18 and a half, 19 years old. And it was like, let's go to California. I've always had this kind of sense of adventure, you know? And so I think that's part of what makes me. So that idea that I was going to be a firefighter, to finally answer your question, that got put on hold, and I worked in building scenery and props and special effects for museums, originally museums, but that eventually became theme park work. So
yeah, when that first job ended, you were in the right place at the right time for your new career.
Yeah, and that becomes a reoccurring theme, I think, for me specifically. I think a lot of people too. You don't realize it until maybe you have a chance to look back on your career, how being in the right place, how much serendipity or whatever, kismet, that luck of just being in the right place at the right time. Especially when you think about a place like Walt Disney Imagineering, which is the top cream of the crop of creative people. If they're busy and they're hiring and you have the skill set, then you can get in. If they're not hiring and they're not busy, and by the way, this entertainment industry, especially theme parks, is very cyclical. When you're busy, everybody's busy, and when there's no work going on, nobody's working. I just happened to hit it. They were looking for people to work on this project called Epcot, and the company I was working for wasn't doing well at the time. Give my boss credit. He said, there's this company called Ed.D Enterprises. Being in the industry at least for a year or two, I knew what Ed.D Enterprises was. That was Disney before it became Imagineering. It was just the right place, right time.
That's awesome. When the building for Epcot ended, as you mentioned, that's it for that. Then you went to set building at Cinnabar.
Yeah. When I originally got hired at Ed.D Enterprises, Imagineering, I was hired as a model maker. And that's kind of an entry-level position for people that can sculpt or paint or build things. For 4 years, I worked at Imagineering. Epcot opened in 82, but we had other work going on. We were doing Tokyo Disneyland. We were doing a new fantasy land for Disneyland. Eventually, though, in 84, the work stopped and I got laid off. But when I was at Disney, I had not really networked. I had met people, and then they left before me, and they had gotten jobs at Cinnabar or other scenery shops in Hollywood. I just called them and said, hey, I got laid off. And they said, great, come on down to Cinnabar and interview. At the time, Cinnabar was one of the biggest non-union scenery shops in Hollywood. And they were really super busy. I mean, I think I worked for them for about 3 years, and I probably worked on 600 projects in 3 years.
Wow. That is a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, that shop, and they had several shops, went 7 days a week, most weekends. If you wanted to work, the work was there. I learned so much working there, because it's just, you're so busy and you're doing so many different things, because not only did they do movies and television and museum work, but they did scenery and special effects and scenic paint. They did everything. They were a one-stop shop. If you're smart, like I was, you absorb everything and you just learn and you ask questions. That was my master class in scenery and all that production kind of stuff.
To give our listeners context, I'll link in our show notes the Wrangler commercial that you worked on that was Indiana Jones inspired, so they can see just the complexity of what you were building in a matter of a couple of days. That's amazing to think about.
Well, that was an interesting project, because a lot of projects are, you're just going to build a model, you're just going to build a big scene, you're just going to paint a backdrop. That series of commercials had everything. That was one of those one of those jobs where I think we were on set for like maybe a week. That's a long time for a commercial. Usually you're in and out maybe 1 day, maybe 2 days. But that went on for a long time. And the production value of that series of commercials is really a great example of the kind of work that I did.
You must have been a really good networker, although I don't think we called it that at the time. And in my early 20s, I wouldn't have known what networking was, but you did get a phone call from Disney to return to work there.
Yeah, in '87, a good friend of mine had stayed at Disney. He was, one of the lucky ones that was able to stay, and he was developing a new theme park called Animal Kingdom. They called up and said, "Hey, would you consider coming back to Disney?" I was like, "Yeah, of course." I mean, I didn't have any bad feelings about Disney. I understood the realities of when there's no work, you're going to get laid off, right? So there was no hard feelings in the fact that Disney valued me enough to want me to come back was great. So I went back for the interview. It wasn't really an interview because they already knew who I was. It was more like, this is what we want you to do. We want you to be a production designer, which was when I first worked at Disney from 80 to 84, I was a model maker. And I worked my way up to senior model maker. They called it dimensional designer.
Mhm.
And when I went back, I was now a production designer. A lot of times when you want to make that big leap, sometimes you have to leave the company. And this was a good example of I made that big leap to production designer. I thought I was going to go work on this animal park. I think once my resume got passed around to other teams, there was this other team that was going to do a movie studio park. And I think once they saw from the last 3 years, I was actually deeply involved in movie production and television production, I got tapped and said, "Hey, this new group wants to talk to you." That was the Disney MGM Studios for Orlando. I got pulled into that team as a production designer for the audio video theaters. That was the start of my second career at Disney.
Yeah, moving out of the tactile and more into the audio and visual.
Into directing. Now I wasn't in the shop working. I was more a production designer is actually the bridge between the concept design and the production. They're the ones that interpret what the creative directors want or the producers want, and they talk to the shops and make sure that it happens the way they intended to have it happen. That's the production designer is that bridge.
Yeah. Oh, that's such an exciting job. You did well. You moved up quite a bit.
I did. I did the production design probably for 2.5, 3 years. And then one day my boss came to me and said, "Hey, we're gonna do a Star Tours attraction in the park that that was now open, or it was almost open." And we realized early on that the capacity wasn't going to be enough. We had to add capacity very quickly. And the Star Tours project had opened in Disneyland, was very successful. And so it was decided that it was going to be added to Florida, the Florida portfolio. And my boss came to me and said, "Hey, we're looking for a producer that can produce this." And naive me, I'm going like, "Well, there's this person, and this person." It cut to me and went like, "Hey, dummy, we think you're perfect for the job." And it's like, me?
Oh.
So I got promoted to producer. I think it's interesting here in that I hadn't produced things like in a formal way, even though some of the work I was doing as a production designer kind of fell into producing. But I was always reminded of this Ray Bradbury quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it. "Sometimes you have to jump off the cliff and you will build your wings on the way down." Essentially, sometimes you have to take that leap of faith and just know you're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And a company like Disney, they encourage you to take chances. They're also not going to let you fail.
Yeah.
Yes, they're going to give you enough rope to kind of figure it out, but they're not going to give you enough rope where you're going to hang yourself. They're just not.
Yeah.
It's not in anyone's best interest for you to fail,
Right.
right? So you know that there's going to be a support staff or it's a support system there, which I probably called on a few times, but they had the belief in me before I had the belief in me, and it was career defining. I was a show producer, and I produced the Star Tours for the Disney MGM Studios.
How fun.
Yeah, so that
How
was
fun.
that was my first producing job.
Oh, that was your first, but what was your favorite of all the time at Disney? What was your favorite experience, favorite project that you worked on?
I think the favorite job was almost right after Star Tours. I was not the producer on this job, but I was asked to come in and help be the production design, help more like creative director. And that was working with Jim Henson and all the great people at Henson Associates to build a Muppet Vision 3D. That original project was bigger than Muppet Vision 3D. We were going to do a whole Muppet Studios. Jim Henson wanted to get back into experimental filmmaking and didn't really want to be the CEO of a big company anymore. Jim and Michael Eisner had kind of this handshake deal that Disney would acquire the Muppets and Jim would then go on and do his experimental filmmaking or what he really wanted to do in the last part of his career. We had started to design a big Muppet Studios presence at the Disney MGM Studios. And I like to tell people that Jim Henson was kind of like my Walt Disney. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. If you grew up in the 50s, Walt Disney was your entertainer, who brought the entertainment.
Yeah.
But mine was Henson with the Muppets and Sesame Street and all of that. And so to more than just meet him, to work with him and just bounce ideas and just share. Tragically, of course, he passed away before the project was done. Then at that point, the family had second thoughts about having Disney acquire the company. They worked it out that we would finish Muppet Vision 3D, which was Jim Henson's last project.
Mm-hmm.
But we wouldn't do the full build out of the studios because the Henson family wanted to retain control and it was just too complicated. Let's just finish what we started and maybe we'll work out some other details. So Frank Oz, who had obviously worked on the film, came in and finished the film that Jim had started. That was for me one of the biggest highlights of my career, just because working with not only Jim Henson, but Michael Frith and Bill Prady and Jim Lewis and all the super creative people at Henson. Yeah. And then, of course, our team as well. And on the project level, everybody was lockstep, arm in arm. Let's just go build something really cool. Yeah. And we had a slight pause, while they worked out some of the details, but we jumped back in, and it was one of that show lasted maybe 20 years. It just closed last year to make room for new Monsters Inc. land.
Yeah.
And that happens. It's like, do I get attached to these projects? Yeah, sometimes, but going back to what I said earlier about what we do is we make memories. Well, we have memories too, I go back and forth between my favorites. The other project that I worked on was Rock and Roller Coaster with Aerosmith, because it was the first big roller coaster that we had done in the park, in the studio park for sure, but it was the first big inversion, where you take people upside down in any of the Florida parks. Yeah. And getting to work with Aerosmith, who were just fantastic to work with. And for a year, me and my music team and the project management team, we would just travel around because Aerosmith was on tour. And we would travel to wherever they were on tour for updates. We would show them the progress. Then we would go to a show. It was almost living the life of a rock star, but not quite. But it was so much fun because they were, the entire band and the entire band's management, they were all into this. And as a band, they took a lot of risks. They had like one of the first pinball machines. They had done movies. They had done music for movies. They were just about, where can our music take us? What can we do with our music that's different? Working with them was just exciting, and they were really into it. And they were like, hey, do you want us to record new stuff? Do you want us to take some of our existing music and alter it for the ride? They could not have been more accommodating. And that project showed it. That project just recently closed, I think a month or so ago. That was there since 98, 99, I guess. So, again, another 25-year, a long run. And that's what they're going to do is the ride's going to stay there, but they're going to put the Muppets in that ride. So it's a little bit of both of what I worked on now is going to live on in some way. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Oh, wow. Your career went pretty well, and then you kept moving up and you were asked to relocate to Paris. Tell us about how that came about and then what the relocation process was like and what made you willing to do it.
Yeah, so after Rock and Roller Coaster, then I was put in charge of both Magic Kingdom Park and the Studio Park for a little while, and I did both parks for a little while. So we did a ton of work in the 90s. That really was a Disney decade. There was a ton of work, both in Florida for sure, where I was attached to. Around 99, there was a team put together to build a second park in Paris. Paris had opened in 92. 8 years later, they were ready to build a second park. They asked me if I would take over creative leadership, being the senior executive producer. And of course, I would love to do that. I would love to, step up and be in charge of a park, right? Because that's the goal when you're a producer, executive producer. You want to be in charge of a park, a full park. So I said, yeah, of course, I'm in. So I was promoted to vice president level at Walt Disney Imagineering. They do a lot of, I don't want to say psychological testing, but they really want to make sure that you're going to thrive or you're going to bloom where you're planted, which is one of the programs, by the way, they took us to called Bloom Where You're Planted.
Okay.
And it's really to talk about you're going to a foreign country. It's not going to be the same. And, we want to make sure that you're going to, again, giving you a support system to be the best you can be. And there's a lot of, kind of talking with people that have done it before and just making sure you know what you're getting into and making sure they talk with your family. Because if your family's going to come, they're obviously going to be affected as well. And so, both my wife and I were brought in and talked to people, and we all said, yeah, we're in. I took a trip there, a couple of familiarization trips early on just to get familiar with the project, meet the project team, because it was a big change for them. Change is difficult for everybody. And so they were not used to me and my style, and we had to sort that out. And then my wife and I and my daughter took a trip early there to look at schools and to look for housing. We, after looking at the international schools and the British schools, and we looked at the American school, we decided the best course for our family was to stay with an American kind of curriculum, an American school. So the American school is in Saint Cloud, which is in the western suburbs. It was just more convenient for us to stay out there. We found a great house. It was just a little bit of a commute for me, but it wasn't a big deal. And we lived in Paris for, my wife and daughter lived there for 4 years because she was going to start high school in the 5th year we were there. And we just knew that she was going to probably go to a private school. And so getting back into the States at 9th grade is going to be much better than trying to get into a private school 10th grade. I stayed an extra year kind of finishing up what I was doing. But it was the greatest experience forever. I mean, for my wife who went to Italy, take cooking classes, and my daughter who now, as from 5th to 8th grade, she understands the world is kind of much smaller. And now she has friends all over the world that they keep in contact with, friends that she made in school. And then every weekend where she didn't have a school project, we would travel. People would come visit us and we'd go, okay, let's go have breakfast in Belgium. We'll have lunch in the Netherlands. We'll have dinner in Germany, and we'll be back home in Paris before nightfall, before end of night. And that was just, you don't realize, I mean, people that have been there realize it, how close a lot of things are. I mean, it's really within driving distance. And it was really just it was a great learning experience. Of course, at the end, my daughter would say, "Not another CCC weekend." Cheese, chateaus, and cathedrals, right? So at some point, you've seen enough of that. So
Yeah.
but we would not change that experience for anything. Now, realizing it's not for everybody. Traveling, you have to be somewhat adventurous. It's just a different mindset. But again, don't be afraid to jump off the cliff. You will build your wings on the way down. And I encourage anybody that is given that opportunity to take it. Take the opportunity because it's just such a learning experience, especially if you're in the creative industry, if you're creative or creativity is part of your job. And I teach this about what is creativity and how to become more creative. And I think about creativity as like this, either like a pachinko game or a pinball game, that little silver ball is that idea you're looking for. And as it bounces off each of those little pegs, it's another experience that you've had. And that's how ideas are generated. You rarely think of something that's never been thought of before. It's putting these different experiences together. So the more of those little silver pegs you can put into your brain, the more creative you're going to be. And how do you get more silver pegs in your brain? You travel, you read, you see what other people are doing, I mean, that's how, through experiences, that's how you get more of those silver pegs. And so I encourage you, especially if you're in the creative industry, do that. Travel, read, do all of those things, and you will be surprised, or maybe not surprised, at how much more creativity comes to you easily, because you have more to choose from. You have more to pick from. So
Right. Oh, it's good advice. We won't spend too long on electronic arts because you weren't there for too long, a couple years to.
less than a year, actually.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Tell us about
after
electronic arts.
I left Disney in 2005, as you become a vice president, the target on your back gets bigger. You become a more expensive commodity,
Yeah.
and so it's like, okay. Um, so I had left in 2005, and another piece of advice for anybody in the workplace: either become a mentor or mentor somebody.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter. I mean, that's part of your networking. Become a mentor or mentor somebody. And I had mentored somebody at Disney who had left before me, and he had gone up to Electronic Arts up in Vancouver, and he was doing very well. And then the first thing I did when I left Disney, the first thing that any um, outplacement organization will tell you is use your own network first. Just
Mhm.
call people, let them know that what you're in, what situation you're in. I called my friend up in Vancouver, and I said, "Hey, just let you know, I got laid off, and so if there's anything, any contacts or anything you can help me with, I'm available." He called me back maybe a day or two later and said, "Oh my God, you would not believe the timing. Electronic Arts was known for their sports games, and they wanted to do more narrative-driven, story-driven games. Like Grand Theft Auto was huge, and a lot of these other games where you go through this whole story were huge." I talked to the head of their studio that he worked for, and we talked on the phone for hours. And it was supposed to be like a 10-minute call. We talked for hours about what is story? How do you develop a story? How do you
Mhm.
tell, and what kind of different narratives are there? What kind of stories are, just the whole thing about what stories are. And they loved what I said. They brought me up to Vancouver. I met with the biggest bosses up in Vancouver, and they offered me a job to take over the studio to do narrative-driven games.
Mhm.
It's great. This is like, I think Thanksgiving had ended. And I said, "Hey, great. Why don't I come up the first week of January and we'll start?" They said, "No, you need to come right now." I got up there the first week of December. I think the second week of December, they brought me into HR and said, apparently PS2 or the PS3 was coming out, and the 360 was coming out, and none of their games are ported correctly to play in those games. Their business was essentially in a nosedive. They said, "The 300 people that we have hired for your studio, you're going to have to lay 200 of them off." And I was there for 2 weeks, and I didn't even know where the washroom was, right? And so it's
Wow.
like, how are we going to do this? I met with the producing team, and I met with the design directors who were like more like project managers. My boss decided it was very stressful. He was going to take his sabbatical. The guy that originally called, that I had mentored at Disney, he had taken a bigger job with Electronic Arts down in LA. So I was there up by myself. All right, how are we going to do this? Well, it's very stressful and it's tough because you don't even know people's names or their skill sets. So you rely on your team and your staff to make the recommendations. We went through it, and now there's hardly anybody left. But I think July or August, they said finally, "Well, there's not really a job for you." And I said, "Duh." It's like, okay. I wasn't surprised. But while I was there, I did get to get 2 games produced, and I really got to understand how video games are, how the sausage is made in video games
Yeah.
and what
Yeah.
pipelines are. And so it was for me, it was rewarding in that way.
Yeah.
Um, not the other way, but it was rewarding that I got to learn a little bit about it. And I made some really good friends that I still keep in contact with. And living in Vancouver, there's worse places to live, and I've lived in them. But Vancouver is not one of them. Vancouver is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
all fine. I don't mean this in such a negative way, but Electronic Arts was a very disorganized company. I say that like we were in a different building and we were doing all these layoffs, and then I would go to the main building and I would look at a room full of people, and I said, "Who are they?" And they said, "Oh, they're the new hires." And I was like, "Well, wait a minute. We got staff here that's experienced, understands how Electronic Arts wants to do work.
Yeah.
Why aren't you guys talking to each other?" And it was just
Yeah.
was somewhat dysfunctional at the time, and
That's a shame.
maybe they got better. I don't know. But
Yeah.
obviously they're still in business, so they're doing something right. But I
Yeah.
just felt like parts of their company were still thinking like a startup, or like they're
Yeah.
still working out of a garage. It was unfortunate because it was just. I think we had a really good team, and it could have been amazing, but that's not the way it works sometimes. So
Yeah.
I left
Yeah.
Electronic Arts, and I had some friends, ex-Disney friends, who had started their own company, and it was called Contour. They said, "We would love to have you. We have a lot of work coming up." And so I actually, more than get hired, I bought into the company. I became a part owner of that company.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there for 5 years or so. We did a lot of great work. I lived in India for a year, working on a project. I lived in Abu Dhabi for almost a year working on a project. We did some work in Dubai, in Doha, in South Korea. So we were a very international company. Unfortunately, 2008 was a giant financial
Yeah.
crisis.
Yeah.
A lot of the big projects kind of dried up.
Yeah.
So we had a bunch of smaller things, but the big ones we just never could land that big project that we had worked on, we had developed. It just no, we couldn't get any way to pull the trigger to make it happen.
Right.
Um,
And so then
so
you had a series of roles at then you had Universal and Century where you got to live in
yeah,
Moscow, Shanghai.
I was in India working on a project, and I got a call
Yeah.
from another guy that I mentored a long time ago. He actually worked for me in Paris, and said, "Would you consider coming back to a big company?" I had known he'd worked for Universal, and he was one of the head creative people at Universal. He
Mhm.
ran this creative studio,
Mhm.
and so yeah, tell me more. And so be about midnight in India, and I would have these interviews with people at Universal from like midnight till 2 in the morning. Eventually, it came around November time, and in November, in the theme park industry, we have a big conference in Orlando called the International Theme Park and Attractions Association, IAPA. So I said, well, I'm coming to IAPA. Why don't we just meet in person? Got there at IAPA, met with the president of Universal Creative and met with HR, and they offered me a position to lead Universal Moscow, which, okay. How many people have heard of Universal Moscow? Nobody, because it never happened. But we worked on it for like, I don't know, 8 months or so. So I started in January, worked on it for about 7 or 8 months, took a couple trips to Moscow, couple trips to the UK, to London, because that's where the architect was working at the time.
Mhm.
And it was an interesting project because it was all contained in one building. It wasn't a traditional theme park. It was in like a shopping mall. We had a lot of innovation on that
Yeah.
project. Universal was not the first company or entity development to do a theme park in a shopping center. There was one in South Korea. There's all over the world they have these things, but
Mhm.
it was pretty huge. Eventually, became apparent that the developer didn't have full control over the property yet. To Universal's credit, they said, "Stop paying us. When you get it figured out, we're ready to go." And so Universal China was starting to pick up. Now, Universal had been talking with China for a number of years, but
Mhm.
now it looked like it was going to be real. I said, I want to do that project. And so I became the executive producer of that. I was originally hired as an executive director, but I got promoted to vice president after the project really got started.
Yeah.
And then, so I did that, lots of trips. The project was in Beijing, but we took trips all over China to look at other projects and look at the competition and to do consumer testing, because we really wanted to understand the Chinese audience. What
Yeah.
intellectual properties would they respond to as a Chinese audience, and what things we had to be wary of, religious context or, those kinds of things. We really wanted to understand the audience.
Yeah.
So I did that. Up until 2017 or 18, the design was done of the park, and we weren't seeing eye to eye with my boss, and I just happened to talk with this. I happened to do a presentation in China at a convention about the future of theme parks in China, from my point of view, and it was live streamed by 500,000 people, and it was like amazing because at the time I didn't know. They said, "Oh yeah, we're going to live stream this," and it's like, okay, fine. 500,000 people, and the head of a company called Century Media saw it
Mhm.
and wanted to get a hold of me. So they got a hold of me, and we talked, And they said, well, we have a client called Evergrande, and their theme park projects are messed up. The chairman has asked Century to come fix it. Now, Century was an advertising company, but they had brought in some Broadway shows and they had produced some films. They had dabbled in other parts of entertainment besides advertising, but they didn't know anything about theme parks. They asked if I would come join Century and help Evergrande figure out their problem or solve their problem. And so, yeah, I did. So I went there and lived in China. I think I moved there in 2019. Was there all through COVID. I couldn't get out of China, even if I wanted to. So I was there all through COVID. We shut down for maybe a week or two. And then every now and then the government would come and tell you to shut down again because the virus was now spread to this part or this part. And we worked all the way through that. The problem was Evergrande didn't listen to anything we said. Nothing. Not a word.
Why hire us if you're not going to do what we're saying?
Exactly what we said. Why are you hiring us if you're not going to take our advice? Yeah. They wanted to do like 15 or 16 parks at the same time. And each park could not duplicate what another park was doing. And each park had to have 33 attractions. So now you've got 500 different attractions that have to be developed. This is dumb. Let's do one.
Yeah.
See what works, see what doesn't work. I would tell them that and they would go, okay. Then they would go to actually they wouldn't go to the chairman because the chairman said he wanted all 16 done at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it works in China. The chairman is the final word.
Yeah.
And the problem was it's just, well, if you know anything about what happened in China in the real estate market, you know that Evergrande, the real estate imploded. So and eventually they said, okay, we'll do 5 theme parks. And then they said, we'll do 3 theme parks. And then eventually it was like, they're not going to do anything. And the other problem was the company. Evergrande was so huge that the chairman said, we're going to build 16 theme parks. The construction group started building 16 theme parks. Oh, wow. Even though they had no idea what was going in them, they were just burning through all this cash. I mean, if you go to China now, you'll probably see 16 half-built or mostly built theme parks with nothing in them. And that's the way it is. I left there in 2002, maybe, and I came back for Christmas with the intention of going back. I had my return ticket. The night before I was going back to China, I said to my wife, I don't feel very good. So here in the States, I got COVID, of course, not in China. I got it here. So, I self-quarantined for a couple of weeks, and then it was an early Chinese New Year. It was an early one. So I thought, well, I'm not going to go back to China during Chinese New Year, because everything shut down.
Yeah.
I didn't go back Chinese New Year. We did a few meetings over Zoom, and it just became apparent that our big client wasn't going to pay. And we were chasing down these other little jobs, and maybe some of them were going to happen and maybe they weren't. But I just felt bad because I was a pretty expensive employee. I told my boss, if any of these projects happen, I'm here for you, but you don't have to pay me until I come back. Don't pay me. But I'm here. If any questions come up and you need any advice or anything, we'll work on that. We'll work that out. So then I decided, what am I going to do now? I had done some networking and some filling out some applications, but I think it just became apparent to me that, maybe ageism has caught up to me, or maybe people thought I was too expensive, or I don't know what, but I wasn't really getting any traction with getting theme park work or museum work here in the States. I thought, I can't find myself sitting on a couch. That's not who I am. I said, well, I always wanted to do a TEDx talk, right? I mean, that first one, something around me, I wanted to do that. So I hired a coach and got me to do a lot of TikToks and to put myself out there. And one of the things I did, which is how I first met you, about 2017, I was still at Universal. I went to South by Southwest to see what that was about.
Yeah.
Now, in my mind, South by Southwest was this music festival.
Right.
But that's what I thought of it was. And I got there in 2017. I was like, oh my God, it was 500,000 people trying to change the world, right? You had music and comedy and films and sustainability people trying to grow, farms. And it was like everything.
Yeah.
So I thought, like, well, what is the one thing that everybody here could use? And I thought, I have pitched probably billions of dollars worth of stuff.
Yeah.
to Michael Eisner and all these executives.
Right.
I think I know how to do this. And so I put a proposal together on how to pitch ideas. And
Yeah.
South by Southwest said, "Wow, this is great. Can you turn it into a workshop?" And I was like, "Yeah, even better."
Yeah.
And so maybe 5 years ago, I did my first one, and it was great. People waiting couldn't get in, and every year I kind of put it in again, and I say, "How about workshop pitching?" And they go, "Great." So I just I've done it for like 5 years now.
Yeah.
And now, in addition, once you get to be a speaker at South by, they all ask you, "We'd love to have you mentor people. If you wouldn't mind, could you do some mentoring?" And I did it last year, and I did it this year as well. And it's very rewarding. It's unfortunate you get like 15, 20 minutes with each person, and you really try to understand what problems they're trying to solve for, and
Right.
you try to get to it. But the
Yeah.
good thing is you exchange emails, or you exchange and say, "Let's talk about this further." And this is how I met Catherine Robert. So yeah, and so yeah, but for me, I wanted to speak more, and eventually I did do a TEDx talk. I did it in Dublin. Um, we had some technical issues, and so I was kind of like off my game. So I need to do another one now, and so I want to do another one. And I've written like maybe 40 or 50. I have like 40 or 50 TikToks written that I
Yeah.
haven't done yet.
Yeah.
But I've done probably maybe 30 already, and they're about creativity, how to build teams, how to be more creative, what it means to be an introvert in an extroverted industry. Because
Yeah.
believe it or not, I'm an introvert. And that's actually what my TEDx talk was about. 2-3 minutes of just real easy to take in, and to hopefully people get something out of them. So that's,
Yeah.
but now what I'd like to do is take my speaking engagement to bigger audiences, maybe keynotes, go to different companies and talk about how to be creative, and how to know if you're surrounded by yes men, and how to know what to do to stop that, and how to get the most out of your team. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
things that can cross over. And
Yeah. It's really good practical advice. It really does land in a place that makes sense, and it's just comforting.
yeah, I think you mentioned it early on. One of the most important pitches that you'll ever do in your life is how to pitch yourself.
Mhm.
You know, especially if you're trying to pivot in a career,
Right.
like I did several times. I've
Yeah.
had to pivot.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? How do you get over the fear of, "Oh my God, how am I going to pay my bills?" Get through that, which is
Yeah.
a real thing. It's a real fear.
Yeah.
To how do I, "Oh my God, I was at Disney for 23 years. I was cloistered. I never networked enough. I never thought I would have to.
Mhm.
Oh wait, I did network a little bit. Oh yes, I still know people." So getting through that doubt, you start to doubt yourself. Oh, if this company didn't want me, nobody wants me, which is crazy. That's just crazy talk.
Yeah.
So,
Spiral of self-doubt,
so
so much fun.
yeah. So getting to pitch yourself is so important. And I teach a little bit at the end of my how to pitch. I teach it's a lot of the similar stuff, but it is a little different than how to pitch yourself.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got like 2 minutes, you're at a networking event, you have 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and you got like, "This is who I am. This is what I can do for you."
Yeah.
So there's a
Oh,
little bit
yeah,
of
and
that.
South by Southwest was the best place for that, to learn how to do it, to practice it, and everybody was there for the same purpose, so all the
Yeah.
participants, we were equally happy to pitch to each other to help each other practice, so that was really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you make it benefit priorities, like, I'm not pitching because of me, I'm pitching for you, for your benefit.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm pitching myself, but I'm pitching myself to benefit you. And if you
Yeah.
start to frame it that way, it just becomes, oh, of course. Sometimes it's so easy to understand once somebody points it out to you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Ah. Alright, my favorite last question. What advice do you have for young professionals who are just getting started in their careers?
There is a quote by Douglas Adams uh, that I loved when I first heard it, and I thought like, oh yeah, that's what I became. It goes, "I may not have ended up where I intended to go, but I ended up where I needed to be." And I guess what I take from that is, you have an idea, especially when you're out of college and you have an idea, I'm going to go do this. Well, good luck, because it rarely works out that way. Life hands you stuff and gives you an opportunity that you go like, oh, I can't miss that opportunity. I can't miss the opportunity to go live in LA and work in entertainment, even though I wanted to be a firefighter. And not only life hands you opportunities, but life also puts up roadblocks or puts up things that hurdles that you like, oh, my significant other is ill and I need to take a time away from what I wanted to do to deal with that. Or my dream job just evaporated, or whatever it is. So I guess the takeaway here is don't beat yourself up if what you intended to do doesn't happen. Don't beat yourself up if it doesn't happen right away. I talk to a lot of young adults leaving school, and I talk about how to set up your portfolio, because a lot of them, I go to art schools and design schools, and I look at their portfolio, and they're getting ready to show their portfolio, and so I do a review. And I asked them, like, what's your dream job? Oh, I want to be an Imagineer. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I tell them, I said, that's great, but you're not going to be an Imagineer unless Imagineering is hiring. So that's a great aspiration, but don't get frustrated if it doesn't happen, or if it doesn't happen right away. Find happiness, find satisfaction in doing the work you're doing. Maybe it's not for Universal, or maybe it's not for Disney. But find some happiness in doing the work that you're doing, but maybe you're doing it for yourself, or maybe you're not doing it for Disney, but you're doing it for somebody else. Find that level of that happiness, because your career, hopefully, God willing, your career is going to be long, and it's going to take some changes, or it's going to take some turns that you, at this point in your life, you're going to have no idea that what's going to happen. But enjoy the ride, enjoy the process. Yes, have those long-term goals, but don't forget you need some short-term happiness also. That's really the one big lesson that I've learned is I never thought I would be a vice president at Disney or Universal. I thought I was going to be a firefighter and a paramedic, but I'm happy. I'm very happy to how it ended up, because along the journey along the way was what made it fun. I never thought I was going to live in Paris for 5 years, or in Mumbai, India, or I was going to live in Beijing. I mean, those things just, you don't, when you're young and coming out of school and you're thinking like, I'm going to find my first job, you don't think about those things. So when they come, keep an open mind, keep an open mind and enjoy the journey. There you go.
In your case, enjoy the roller coaster, right?
Hey, I'm gonna steal that because careers are like that. You're going up a hill, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, hold on. And then you're in this little slow spot. You're going through a brake zone for a while. And the reason you're going through a brake zone is you don't hit the car in front of you. So there is a reason for it. There is a reason maybe your career gets stalled a little bit. You may not know the reason, but there's a reason. The reason is something greater is going to come along when you're during this brake zone. That's it.
There you go. Paul Osterhout, it has been a true pleasure having you as my guest. Thank you for sharing today.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks so much for this. And I hope people get something out of this. I'm going to go look at those links now, because I haven't seen the Wrangler jeans commercial probably in 40 years. So.
Oh my goodness. That's awesome. To learn more about Paul Osterhout's guidance for creative leaders and his framework for crafting the perfect pitch, see the links in our show notes. I'm so excited you're here. And remember, you're not alone on your career journey. Together, we can share our stories, move boldly into that perfect job, and we can light the path for our future fearless careerists. I'm Catherine Robert, and I can't wait to hear your story.
Fearless Careerist is available on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Subscribe there or visit us at catherinerobertedd.com.